Welcome back, everybody. It is November the 1st. We are now 2 days away from the elections taking place on Tuesday night. We have basically officially made it through the election season. After the month of October ends, you can basically write a finish to it. The election is here, it is now, and we will pretty much, I won't say we're going to know all the results on Tuesday night because of a number of factors, but we are going to have at least a pretty strong idea of where this stands. Now, obviously, if you're watching this video, you can tell we're going to be doing something a little different today, as the map is already filled in, and it's pretty consistent from last time. 349 for the Democrats, 189 for the Republicans. We've had some polling come out in the last 24 hours that could suggest a couple of different things, potentially in Florida. But again, the reason I still have it characterized that way is because of a polling average lead, because of the history of this state electing Joe Biden, and all the other things we have broken down over the course of this channel. Now, in this video, though, here's what we're going to do differently. This is going to be purely a video where I simply answer viewers' questions. Okay, we've had quite a few of them. Okay, so in the last 24 hours, we've received a number of comments specifically pertaining to how in God's name is Donald Trump going to win this race. Okay, so here is that's what we're going to do in this video. Okay, so if you have a question, as always, type them down in the comment section below, and I will do my best to answer them for you. So obviously what we have to do is, like, I can't answer every single one of you, but we're definitely going to answer the ones where it's a real question, a real comment. It's not just Biden 2020 or something like that. Like, I really need a firm something like that. So the first one comes from ACCA. Says, a quote, according to 538, the data. LMAO, why do you believe corporate polls? Well, the reason is the polling is the best indicator that we have in elections. They are not perfect, okay? In fact, sometimes they are incorrect altogether. But here's the thing. A poll that shows one thing and an election that ends up going a different way does not mean that the poll was done improperly, that the poll was, it does not mean the poll was quote unquote wrong, in the sense that all a poll is a snapshot in time of a small sample size of voters. Okay, over time, really since the 1980s, polling in the United States has traditionally been very accurate. And I have to remind you again, in 2016, the polls were correct. They were more correct than they were in 2012. They were more correct than they were in the midterms in 2018, and they certainly were more correct than they were in 2008. Okay, so keep that in mind. Hillary Clinton led by about 3% on Election Day in the national popular vote averages. What did she win by? 3 points. Okay, the only state, I reiterate, the only state that they were just dead wrong in was Wisconsin, where she had a lead above the margin of error by a pretty significant margin, and Donald Trump ended up winning it. If you apply the same shift to this state that we saw 4 years ago to this election, Joe Biden still wins. So that's number one. Here's one from One Survivor. Bit of a long-winded one, so I'm going to at least touch on a little bit of it here. Trump is going to win Florida. Look at the early vote return data. Democratic strategists literally said that they needed a 600,000 to 700,000 vote lead by Election Day to win the state. Their lead was around 500,000 in the state early and has since dropped like an absolute rock. It is now down to around 90,000. It's below the early vote lead Clinton had in 2016. Numbers in traditional Democrat strongholds like Miami-Dade are looking abysmal. So I'm going to stop there. I'd like to see that information before I can really corroborate that, because I mean, I've been in Miami-Dade County throughout this. We've been seeing different things potentially. I'm not saying that your information is wrong necessarily. Here's where I agree with One Survivor. I think Trump supporters and Republicans in general should be, I wouldn't say confident about their chances of winning Florida, just because the margins are so tight and Biden still leads in the averages here. But I would say optimistic. You can be sort of not confident, but also optimistic, I think, at the same time. Remember, Donald Trump led in this state by 1% in the final RCP averages on Election Day, and he won by 1.2%. Again, another state where the polls were basically dead on. Okay, here's the other thing about Florida. I think what you're seeing is, in these early vote turnout numbers, the Republicans have done a pretty good job here, in that the Democrats usually have a big registration advantage and an early vote advantage. Potentially, what could be happening here is, I think if you're the Democrats, you're hoping that Biden supporters are going to come out in full force on Election Day. Now, this number that one survivor pointed out about how the Miami-Dade numbers are bad, I do not agree with that because, as we know, Miami is a big college town, and I think the numbers, are pretty high. Number one, you have a couple of competitive House races that are also boosting turnout down there. And again, we have seen some data from the Miami Herald and others that I will cite going forward that have shown that turnout indeed is pretty high down there, further boosting the Democratic Party's chances. Another thing he said here, Trump is going to win Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, Texas, Ohio, Iowa, Maine second. He will probably win Arizona as well, although that one is more in question, in my opinion. Okay, so let's break this down. So he mentions Florida going his way. So let's see if Donald Trump can even win in that scenario, right? Because that's obviously a lot of different states here. Let's say Florida, right? Georgia, North Carolina. Now he's pretty close, obviously. He's already won Texas, Iowa, Ohio, and we'll give him the district in Maine. Still loses. Still loses, right? So clearly, one survivor, correct me if I'm wrong, and please reply to this if I'm characterizing this incorrectly, but you seem to be someone who is obviously a little more bullish about Donald Trump's chances. Well, just for some context here, and this is just to kind of prove the point that Joe Biden has the upper hand, at least right now, 48 hours away, is because you just gave him Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, Texas, Ohio, Iowa, and Maine 2nd District, and he still ends up losing the election. Okay, that's why I kept pointing out that this map is rather lopsided. And right now, again, all the evidence we have, and again, polling is imperfect, guys. I can't stress that enough. Polling is imperfect. This is the map we have right now. Look at this, okay? That's the map that we have right now, pushing Joe Biden all the way to 349. Now, I realized in a video yesterday, I got a bunch of comments about this, that I accidentally left Illinois as solid Republican. I knew something looked a little weird on the map, but I just couldn't spot it in time. Honest mistake. Have fun with it, guys. Okay, another one. Interesting one here from, I'm totally going to butcher this name. I'm so sorry. Kjetil Sevlund. Says, from Norway, Trump will win all states like he'd won in 2016, plus Nevada and Minnesota. The Senate will be 53 to 47, give or take one seat. Congress, Trump will gain seats, but Democrats will keep it with 230 seats. Okay? Thank you so much for that comment. I love getting these. The international input is so interesting. I really love seeing where you guys are coming from on a lot of this stuff. So here's where I would push back a little bit. First of all, Trump will win all states that he won in 2016. Okay, so are you sure that he's going to be able to hang on in Arizona, where we have a lot of evidence to suggest he's not going to? Okay, he's not going to win Michigan. I'm sorry, he's not going to win. Guys, if Donald Trump wins the state of Michigan, I will come back on here, I will apologize, I will laugh at myself, and I will encourage everyone to laugh at me, okay? I really refuse to believe at this moment in time that Donald Trump is going to pull out the state of Michigan. Okay, Wisconsin, he's underwater. Pennsylvania, he's mildly underwater. North Carolina, he happens to be underwater. And this to me is a little bit more of just a gut feeling based on all the data we have, even though it's very, very tight. I still think Joe Biden's going to be able to just barely eke this out. And I have not mentioned very close states like Texas, Iowa, Ohio, and Georgia, which also happens to be characterized in a certain way. Now, Nevada, I've talked before about how this is a very vulnerable Democratic state in certain elections. If you have a very, very good Republican candidate, a weak Democratic incumbent, again, turnout operations in this state have been a little bit hampered in recent years, and especially this year because of the pandemic, as we know. But as we've also established, Republicans in the state are always overstated in the polling, and the Democrats happen to be leading there this time around, to me kind of cementing the fact that I really think the Democrats are in position to hang on in this state. So I can't really see a scenario where Joe Biden doesn't come away with these 6 votes. Now, Minnesota, I understand that the Biden campaign going down there on this last day, guys, let's be honest. Like, that to me was just him, like, sort of trying to not be complacent, trying to not make the Hillary mistake from 4 years ago. There's been no evidence to suggest Donald Trump is going to win this state. All 3 statewide races in the midterms went the Democrats' way. The Senate race is clearly going the Democratic Party's way here as well. Turnout after the George Floyd situation is going to be very, very high. The polls have narrowed a little bit, which is why I only label this likely. instead of safe as I have recently on my channel, but I just cannot see this going that way. Now, I also want to touch on what Kjetil said about the Senate seats, 53 to 47 plus or minus 1. I also sharply disagree with that, respectfully, because we know that the Democrats have 10, that's right, 10 opportunities at Senate seats. Good opportunities. Arizona, Colorado, Montana, Kansas, Iowa, 2 seats in Georgia, North Carolina, Maine, okay? And then Texas as well, and South Carolina. Okay, that may even have been 11, I'm not sure. And we can't even forget what is a potentially competitive race as well in Alaska, okay? There's a lot of opportunities for the Democrats. And I've said this before on the channel. We know that the Republicans are going to pick this one up here in Alabama to push their number from 53 to 54, okay? I think a best case scenario, absolute best case scenario for the GOP is if they win in Montana, they win in Iowa, they win both seats in Georgia, which looks increasingly unlikely, they win in North Carolina, and they lose in Arizona, Colorado, and Maine for 3 losses to push the number from down to 51 to 49, and that's also assuming they hang on in Texas, in South Carolina, and in Kansas, and in Alaska, okay? And right now, there's really little reason to believe that either Jon Ossoff or Raphael Warnock is going to win this Senate seat out here in Georgia, okay? But again, thank you so much for that comment. Really interesting stuff. So now I also saw something from, where is it here? Just Me Again. The comment is, when there is record turnout at the polls, Democrats typically win. Think about it. More people are voting because they want, in all caps, change. They are fed up with something. So you're absolutely correct, Just Me Again. You're absolutely correct in that when there is higher turnout, that generally gives you the sense that the opposite party is coming back with a vengeance. That is typically the case. Now, here is where that gets a little dicey sometimes, because what we do sometimes see is there is very high turnout, but the numbers don't end up always backing that up. Those two things can be mutually exclusive, and that an example of that was what happened in 2018. That was the highest turnout ever for a midterm election. Now, it obviously, was very beneficial to the Democrats in the House as they picked up 40 seats. They also picked up 7 governorships. But remember, the Senate wasn't a very good night for them, right? In that turnout, even though the turnout again was very high, the reality of the situation is it doesn't always line up with the races, because they lost a Senate seat in North Dakota, a Senate seat in Indiana, a Senate seat in Missouri, and a Senate seat in Florida. Now, Florida was definitely a little surprising, because we knew how high turnout was going to be here, because again, Democratic wave year, bad approval numbers for Donald Trump here, and this was shortly after the Parkland school shooting. I always think of current events as being big harbingers of what you can sometimes see in a certain state. That's why I've always been very, very confident in Joe Biden's ability to win Minnesota, in part because of what we're seeing in Minneapolis. But that just didn't happen in Florida. But the reason I point that out in the Senate is because, turnout in North Dakota is never going to be that high necessarily, right? And in Indiana, how big is Democratic turnout even on the best of days, right? So Democratic turnout was very high in Virginia, where they flipped some House seats, in Illinois, right? In Arizona, in California, it was sky high, and that can help you in the House, but it doesn't always help you in the Senate necessarily, or even sometimes in the presidential races. And that's the thing that the Democrats have to be wary of, is just because we're seeing extremely high turnout numbers, it could just be that more and more voters are voting in California and in New York, and in Illinois. Now, we have seen great numbers to this point in Texas, and I think that the turnout numbers are going to help them in the Senate this time more than it did 2 years ago, because there are just so many more pickup opportunities for the Democrats. So again, we don't have to go through them all again, but Arizona, Colorado, Montana, Iowa, North Carolina, Maine, Kansas, South Carolina, Texas, so many of them, right? And so they have many opportunities to gain seats in the Senate, which I fully expect them to do, and I expect them to get 3, 4, 5 House seats. So Just Me Again raises a very astute observation, in my opinion. Now, let's see here. Okay, A Wars says, this is very good analysis, but the problem is he was also behind in most of the states he flipped in 2016. Okay, so this is, I really appreciate this comment. So, again, polling was just not that wrong, guys. It really wasn't that wrong. You have to remember the margin of error. The margin of error is almost always 3 or 4 percentage points, right? Donald Trump, guys, led in the state of Florida by 1% on that Tuesday morning. guys, the polling wasn't wrong. The media was wrong. Okay, and I hate that term, the media. Okay, because I hate lumping all the networks in at one point together. Of course, look, we knew Fox News was certainly predicting a Donald Trump victory, but that's just it's no secret that Fox News obviously has a certain opinion, and just like MSNBC has a certain opinion, and OAN has a certain opinion, and the Huffington Post, and we understand that, but at the end of the day, the networks, I think, were all really, like, the hard journalism and the hard news was not necessarily paying attention to the data, and instead I think everyone was so wrapped up in the fact that, look, do we really expect the reality TV star that has had some controversies over the course of the campaign season to end up actually winning this election after a Democrat has won the previous two elections, especially when she has a narrow lead in the polls? Nah, right? I remind you guys one more time, the final RCP electoral college prediction. In other words, if you just add up all the polling averages in each state and give them to a certain candidate, pardon me, they show a leaning in one way or another, and it gives Hillary Clinton 272 to Donald Trump's 266. That's pretty striking, right? That's pretty striking. So the polling, again, just wasn't that wrong. Donald Trump led in Florida. He actually even led by 1 point in Nevada. Hillary Clinton had very small leads in Wisconsin, or actually had a bigger lead in Wisconsin. That one was just dead wrong. Very small lead in Michigan. Very small lead in Pennsylvania. She was down in North Carolina. She was down in Georgia. Way down in Texas. Down in Arizona. Okay? She was just barely ahead in these 3 states. Okay? And this was the only one that did not go according to the polls. And guys, I point out, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I have to point this out. The polling in 2016 was about as correct as it's been in recent memory. Really, it was. Okay. But again, thank you so much for the comment. So let's see. Desert Rats, good name. They did not change how the polling was done in 16, and you're trusting them anyway? They did change them. Okay, they did change them. I'm going to start to go through a little bit of a rapid fire here, so I apologize if I don't dwell on your comment for too long, but they did change them. Most of them have updated their methodology. The only reason is we're seeing so many more sheer pollsters than we have in the past, so that's why we're seeing a lot of sort of a discrepancy potentially in some of the average polling data. Let's see here. Bubba Lubba says, you don't get that Democratic states will flip. The public doesn't want to shut down. Which ones? I mean, seriously, I would encourage you to comment again. Which ones? Because which Democratic state is going to flip? We've touched on over and over again how I can't expect. There are really 3 states, right? Nevada, Minnesota, New Hampshire. New Hampshire definitely won't because, again, polling has been so solid there. And guys, I also want to remind you, Hillary Clinton, if she's able to win these states, I mean, Hillary Clinton was so disliked, and that ended up being a Republican wave year. So if Hillary Clinton won one of these states, why do we expect it to flip now, right? I get why people in the Democratic circle are worried about Minnesota. I just can't really get on board with that idea, and the numbers can't back up Nevada. Colorado certainly won't. New Mexico certainly won't. I mean, which other state? Just tell me which one. And again, if I'm wrong, I'll eat those words, no question about it. Virginia is always a little close sometimes, but I don't know. I mean, I'd be very shocked if Joe Biden did not carry each state that Donald Trump was able to win. Let's see here. LT Croc says, I guarantee a Trump win. Guaranteed he'll get Texas, Florida, Pennsylvania, Minnesota. Again, with Minnesota, look, I'm not attacking anyone for what they watch or for what news but look, Fox News has advanced this idea a lot here that Minnesota could go to Donald Trump. Again, I understand that it was very close in 2016, but there's just no evidence, again, to back that up. I totally understand the sentiment, though, about Texas, Pennsylvania, and Florida. Donald Trump could easily take all 3 of those, okay? So let's see. Let's get a couple more in here. Gloria Wilson says, I knew something was going south for the Republicans when the Texas governor stepped in to suppress the vote. Just like Trump shocked the world by winning the Rust Belt, Biden will shock the world and win Texas. Trump pulled his money out of Texas and is making a Hillary mistake. The Bush Republicans will vote against Trump. Okay, so interesting about Texas here, which incidentally is where I am now. I've traveled home to Dallas for the election. Interestingly enough, in this state, I think the Democratic Party, there are two sides to this coin, right? You could say that Trump is making a Hillary mistake, but I don't really think he is, actually, because, first of all, his campaign has been broke now for a little while. They're basically out of money, and so they can't really afford to be too worried about Texas, because they know that these states that are illuminated in various shades of blue are where the election is going to be decided. I think it was actually the proper decision on the part of the Trump campaign to sort of take Texas for granted, because it's so difficult for the Democrats to win here. I think, look, I don't want to sound, like but, whatever. I mean, Greg Abbott, the governor, that was not exactly something I'm too happy about, that we saw all the drop boxes limited to one state. That is brazen open voter suppression, guys. Or not one state, each county only has one drop-off site. I mean, to me, that's pretty brazen, okay? And those are the words of also plenty of federal judges and Republicans. That was not an endorsement of democracy. Let's just be honest, okay? And so I think that combined with the fact that this state has an identity and has for ages since Jimmy Carter and Lloyd Benson, this is a Republican state still, and I think that Donald Trump can't really afford to worry about this. Here's where your comment is interesting, though. If anything, I think Joe Biden might be making the Hillary mistake here, because what he would say is, look, we're just trying to expand the map everywhere we can, and the polling has been so close here, we have no choice but to spend here. Now, I will defend them on this point. They have so much money left to burn that they can still keep themselves, like they can still kind of do both things at once, where they can keep their eye on the ball in the Rust Belt in North Carolina while also remaining like right in it in Texas. So I'll give them that. But if you're a Democrat, you're sort of saying we're doing it again. We're screwing it all up again. We should just be riding a bus up and down these three states and not stopping until polls close on Tuesday night, right? So if anything, I think it's the same thing, but in reverse. I think Joe Biden might be the one actually making that mistake. Okay, I'm going to touch on, let's say, two more here. Let's see. Okay, Steve Bingham says, brilliantly argued, when you get to Florida and give it to Biden, I thought, no, you're not explaining how the hell Trump can win. And then you carried on with the predictions that are supported by the evidence. Georgia, North Carolina, etc., all adding to the Biden count. I was a bit disappointed, but then you started to go counterfactual and give Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, etc. to Trump. Exactly. That's the point, guys, is you have to look at this number here, 349. It's a lot of votes to spare. Okay? That's 79 votes, right? And so again, you may look at this map and say, oh my gosh, there's no way that, Joe Biden's going to win this way. Well, again, if we start to fill this in and be pretty generous towards Donald Trump, again, I can't, this is always an interesting dynamic how we do this. Let's throw him this as well. He still doesn't win, guys. And I just gave him 4 states that I can't really think actually add up that way. The only way this happens is if one of these go as well. And I would say of these 3, the most likely would be this one. And only then does he win by 10 votes. 10. Okay, that's it. He's not going to get New Hampshire. He's not going to get Minnesota. He's not going to get Nevada. Okay, he could get Arizona potentially. But again, to me, this is kind of a best case scenario at the moment for Donald Trump, which is a tie, and this actually goes the Republican Party's way because they have the House delegations 26 to 24, if you could believe that, okay? But again, our map currently stands this way, okay? Far, far closer than that, with the Democrats also taking sharp leads in the Senate races. We're going to have another video about that coming up later today. So thank you guys so much again for watching this video. Thanks for sticking with it throughout the campaign season. We're obviously going to be coming out with a lot of new stuff after the election as well, with a bunch of analysis, and we'll get into some more Senate stuff before Tuesday as well. Comment down the suggestions below. I'll be sure to answer them as I have today. I can't get to every single one, but I'll do the best I can. So thank you guys so much again for watching, and I'll see you in November.